For more on the hearings, I want to bring in Scott Wong. He's a senior reporter for The Hill. So, Scott, what exactly was in those documents that Senator Booker released?
Well, there were several documents. I think the one that he was referring to in your clip had to do with discussions in the White House that were taking place right after 9/11 in 2002. There was some discussion about how certain law enforcement programs should be developed, how TSA should handle security measures for airports. In the TSA agency that was being developed at that time. And so these were arguments, discussions that were taking place in the White House. Cory Booker believes that it revealed or showed some of Kavanaugh's discrimination against Muslims, perhaps, but Kavanaugh is denying that. And, it's very interesting now. We are seeing senators sort of racing to release documents in the Kavanaugh hearings.
But, Scott, the punishment here for releasing these committee confidential documents could be as serious as actually being kicked out of the Senate. How likely do you think that's going to happen, especially with Booker and Hirono releasing these documents?
I think it's very unlikely that Republican colleagues would move to expel a member of the Senate. In this case, it is sort of unprecedented that we would see Democrats, competing with one another to release these documents that the White House has deemed confidential. However, in the comments of Dick Durbin, one of the Democratic leaders who also serves on Judiciary, he said that he stands with Cory Booker. He associates himself with Cory Booker's actions. And that if you're going to move to retaliate against Cory Booker, then you'll have to move against almost all Democrats, and Republicans, I think, are unwilling to do so.
I want to also ask you about another exchange. This one was from last night, and it was between California Democrat Kamala Harris and, of course, Brett Kavanaugh.
Have you discussed Mueller or his investigation with anyone at Kasowitz, Benson, and Torres, the law firm founded by Mark Kasowitz, President Trump's personal lawyer? Be sure about your answer, sir.
Well, I'm not remembering, but if you have something you want to...
Are you certain you've not had a conversation with anyone at that law firm? Who'd you talk to?
I don't think I'm not remembering, but I'm happy to be refreshed, or if you want to tell me who you're thinking of.
Are you saying that with all that you remember, you have an impeccable memory? You've been speaking for almost 8 hours, I think more, with this committee about all sorts of things you remember. Yeah. How can you not remember whether or not you had a conversation about Robert Mueller or his investigation with anyone at that law firm? This investigation has only been going on for so long, sir. So
right,
please
I'm not sure.
I'm
just trying to think. Do I know anyone who works at that firm? I might know. I would like to know the person you're thinking of, because what if there's...
I think you're thinking of someone and you don't want to tell us.
All right. Well, that exchange was actually interrupted later by Republican Mike Lee. What do you think this says? What do you think this means? Her pushing for this. This is actually Trump's lawyer's law firm. Why do you think that he sort of painstakingly avoided that question?
Well, I think these are questions that could come before the Supreme Court in future months, especially once we know the results of the Robert Mueller investigation, specifically whether Trump can intervene and stop the Mueller investigation, whether he can fire Robert Mueller himself or members of his team. And so if Kavanaugh is serving on a Supreme Court that is deciding those types of issues, I think it's important, whether we know whether he has had conversations with some of Trump's attorneys who are specifically brought on to deal with the Russia investigation.
And, Kavanaugh at this point, Scott, is there anything that would indicate to you that his nomination chances of being confirmed are actually heard at this point?
I don't think so. We saw the swearing in of former Arizona Senator John Kyle yesterday, who replaced John McCain in the Senate. They are back at 51 seats. It is a narrow majority, but it is a majority, and with a simple majority vote, they can confirm Kavanaugh. especially with perhaps some help from the vice president. And we are expecting some Democrats to perhaps come across the aisle and provide additional votes. So right now, as I see it, there has not been any sort of knockout blow. Certainly, these new email releases have raised some questions, but so far it looks like he is on his way to confirmation.
All right, Scott, before we go, I want to ask you also about something that kind of caught our eye that came down today. The Trump administration wants to change a rule that would actually allow undocumented children to be detained indefinitely. This actually is if you're pending an immigration court case. Previously, they had to release these kids within 20 days. What is this? Do you believe this has traction? And what does it mean for the families who have children in U.S. detentions?
Well, if this rule is implemented by the end of the year, it will mean that people that come across the border and bring their children will now be detained indefinitely together rather than separating kids and parents. But that indefinite detention is sort of the key. It would last until a court case is resolved, until they are either deported or granted access to the United States. It throws the immigration issue right front and center right before the November midterm elections. I think that's part of why the Trump administration and why the president pushed so aggressively to get this rule completed. And so, once again, an issue that we thought was sort of on the back burner, immigration and child detentions, is front and center once again.
And Scott, you know, there's roughly, last estimate we had, which was from a few weeks ago from DHS, that there are roughly 500 kids who still remain separated from their parents. What happens to those kids? Do we know?
Well, I think DHS is, in a lot of those cases, has struggled to reunite those children with their parents, either because they can't locate them or because those parents have already been deported back to their own countries. It's really an individual basis, but it's unclear in these very difficult circumstances what's going to happen with these 500 kids.
All right, Scott Wong, grateful you could join us from the Hill. Scott, thank you.
Thank you very much.